Today we want to talk about a real significant prayer in the Old Testament. A lot of prayers in the Bible. Of course, the most wonderful one is the little prayer that the Lord Jesus himself prayed, Our Father which art in heaven. But there's another prayer in the Bible we want to discuss today with you, and it's found in a most unusual place. And it's some of the Old Testament books of Chronicles, the chronicleize, or there's a chronology of some of the stories of the Old Testament, the things that happened. But in the beginning of the there's First Chronicles and there's Second Chronicles. In the beginning of the First Chronicles, go up to the 4th chapter. There's the Chronicles of God's people. And you might ask, why is that in there? Well, to me it's an illustration of how important every precious human being is to God, especially God's people. Everybody is important to God, but people just walked off and didn't want God. But it's all chronicles, and this guy begot this guy, and this guy begot this, and because all this genealogies and happenings is all listed here in the Old Testament, which shows me how important every living person is to the Lord. And then when they went off into, they kept doing bad things for hundreds of years, perhaps 1,000 years after they came out of Egypt. They would have a king, and then they would have a good king and a bad king, and a good king and a bad king. And they kept stumbling into idolatry. They kept worshiping gods of idols of wood and stone. Well, after the Lord did all those tremendous things for them, bringing them out of Egypt, and all the 10 plagues and all the mighty signs and wonders that he did, and then of course on down through, they weren't eyewitnesses of that, but the stories were there and telling them about all the things that happened. A lot of times the Lord would say, when they crossed not the Red Sea, after they wandered 40 years in the wilderness, now another generation grew up, and now it's time to cross the river Jordan and go in and obtain the promised land. And just like the Red Sea opened up and they went through, well, this time the river Jordan was stopped quite a ways off. And then they walked across with the Ark of the Covenant, and after that happened, the Lord told Joshua, go gather 12 stones out of the riverbed and set them up on this side of the river, on the west side, where they crossed over to, and build a heap of stones. And when your kids ask you, what do these stones mean, you tell them what God did here at the river. And they passed on these stories, on down for the generations. But they slipped away from the story. They slipped away. Somehow they slipped away, and they just started serving. And can you imagine bowing down to something of stone or some piece of wood carved into an image? In Isaiah it says, you people, you take this tree, you cut it down, you cut up the wood, and you build a fire, and you just get all warm, and you say, oh boy, isn't this nice? And you roast your meat. And then with a part of that same tree, you hack out this idol and bow down to it. How nuts is that? So he had to finally send them off into Babylon for 40 or 70 years. And then they came back out, and there's another chronology of all the people that came out of Egypt. I don't know how many of them were, tens of thousands of them. There's the chronicles, the chronology, or the generations of all those people, a lot of them that came out. I don't guess every one of them. Well, yeah, but this doesn't name every one of them by name, but lots of names are there too, and the people that came out of the bondage. And there's no more mention of bowing down to idols after that. The Lord has no pleasure in that kind of thing, but he has to, because he loves them. If he didn't love them, he'd just let them keep on their idolatry, and there'd be no hope. But he redeemed them back out of there. He spanked them good. You spank your kids if you love them right, otherwise you don't. You set boundaries. You come this far, and that's all. That's the far, sweetheart. That's as far as I want you to go. You'll understand when you're older. Well, the Lord's the ultimate good parent. He put up with their idolatry for hundreds of years. They had to have a good king and a bad king, but there was more bad ones than good ones. Anyway, after they came out of there, they had a revival or kind of a good time, and then it was 400 silent years, and then the New Testament began. Whoa, I get excited about Jesus becoming a man. Can you imagine? I mean, God becoming a man in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what happened. My God in heaven. But this prayer of Jabez, it's easy for me to get off. The Lord showed me this years ago when I was in really deep trouble. Oh, I was having a most difficult time in my whole life. I thought God had abandoned me. And in the midst of all these chronologies, I didn't know this was there, but the Lord helped me. There it was. I said, Lord, that's exactly my prayer at the time. And this guy Jabez called on the God of Israel saying, oh, that you would bless me, that you would enlarge my coast, because I was so hemmed in with fear, that you would enlarge my borders, that your hand might be with me, that you would keep me from evil, that it would not grieve me. My God, that's exactly what happened to me. It's a fantastic prayer of the grace and goodness of the Lord. And that's what happened to this guy. It had a little chronology here, and Rekaz, Ahab, these names I can't hardly pronounce, but Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and his mother called his name Jabez, saying, which means sorrowful. His name Jabez means sorrowful, saying, she said, because I have bore him with sorrow. Must have been more than the average, because I guess all women have sorrow or pain or anguish in childbearing, but then after it's done, they're rejoicing. See, that too is a consequence of them saying yes to the snake in the Garden of Eden. So, Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, oh, that you would bless me. You know what it means for God to bless you? Oh, my. The blessing of Abraham. You know what that is? It's incredible in the Old Testament. The story of Abraham starts in Genesis 12. I just go back to the Garden of Eden. Now, that's where it started. God says, see that tree, don't eat it. Well, they ate it, and the world's a mess. Well, and everybody did their own thing, and the Lord was grieved in his heart that he even made man. Because the intent of man's heart was always evil, continually. There was nobody